Yeah. So today we are starting with our qualitative research series, and the first session is going to be on in-depth interviews. So ideally, I should have started with the theoretical concepts and the foundation, but I have always seen that participants are interested in learning the tools, and I'm just trying to align the sessions in line with the interests, your interests, because we are more likely to use these tools. I'll start with these tools, and then sometime in the future we'll look at the theoretical aspects of qualitative research. So, I'm sure all of us know the basic difference between qualitative research and quantitative research. We know that while in quantitative research we are interested in numbers, in qualitative research it is the text or the language data which is of prime importance. The tools or the methods of collection of data are different in these two research methodologies. In quantitative research, we are interested in how many and how much, the answers to these questions, while in qualitative research, we are more interested into what are the reasons, how things are happening, and also why a particular thing is happening or why certain perceptions are there. So in quantitative research, it is the causal association which would be of prime importance, while in qualitative research, we are interested in examining, exploring, or in understanding
So,
a phenomenon. So
phenomenal.
we should be very clear. 1 minute. I think Dr. Karthik, I think you need to mute yourself. Dr.
Okay.
Karthik, yes, thank you. Yeah. So when you are looking at your research question, you have to be very clear about what kind of research methodology is appropriate to answer your research question. So this I had already, we have looked at these photographs and we have tried to understand how quantitative research is different from qualitative research. Can anyone remember what we discussed about this particular slide? You can unmute yourself, and if you remember, you can just narrate.
Ma'am, good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, different ways in which like person can be out, like
Mm. Yes. So
like
what
in
will
a
happen
first,
in
second time.
quantitative research? In quantitative research, all we are interested is that the batsman is out or not, and at the most, what is the method in which the batsman has got out. So we will say that four batsmen are out, that is a number, and four out of four are clean bowled. That's all. But in qualitative research, we are more interested in the phenomenon. How did this batsman get out? What are the reasons? What are the mechanisms? How is the person perceiving that phenomenon? What is happening in the crowd? So all those descriptions, right? So both are important, both are telling us very different kinds of information, and that is exactly what is quantitative and qualitative research. They complement each other. They give different kinds of information which can be used in different ways, and that is what we need to really understand. Again, this table is very commonly understood in the research community. What are the differences in the quantitative and qualitative research with respect to design, method, sampling, and the context? I'm not going to go into this because, as I said, our focus is on a particular tool in qualitative research. So that is in-depth interviews. So what are interviews? Interviews are nothing but they are formal conversations in which the goal is to gather information. So there is one interviewer and there is one interviewee, and they are talking to each other. It is a two-way communication process, which is in which there is exchange of ideas and exchange of information between the participants who are involved in the interview. Now, these interviews are classified as either structured, semi-structured, unstructured, or even informal interviews. Now, these structured interviews, what is the difference between these four is the amount of flexibility we allow while conducting the interview. Does anyone know the difference between open-ended and closed-ended questions? What is the difference between open-ended and closed-ended questions?
Ma'am, like in close-ended question, we try to ask question in the form which they give answer as yes or no. Like there is no more scope in answering what we are
Correct,
trying.
correct. Yes. So in the closed-ended questions, we give options, isn't it? We give two options, three options, four options, and the respondent has to choose between the options. That is a closed-ended question. And an open-ended question is one where there is a broad question and there are no options. The respondent has to narrate or give us the answer. There are no options to choose from. So, how are these open-ended and closed-ended questions related to these kinds of interviews? Do you think we can have open-ended questions in a structured interview, or is it closed-ended questions only in structured interviews? What is your thought about it? So I just want to bring to focus one point that structured interview can have both open and closed-ended question, right? Whatever questions are included in your questionnaire, you have to stick to those questions and to the flow or the sequence of the questions in the questionnaire. That is structured interview. There is no freedom or flexibility for you to change the sequence of the questions or to change the wording of the question or add any questions to the questionnaire which has been finalized. That is why it is called as a structured interview. You can have both closed-ended or open-ended questions or a combination of both in a structured interview. In a semi-structured interview, there is an interview schedule. Now, this has just a broad list, some questions, a broad list of some broad questions, but you have flexibility here. You can drop a few questions, you can add a few questions, you can add some sub questions. So you have flexibility, and these are all usually open ended questions in a semi structured interview. In an unstructured interview, you only have a broad topic in mind. You don't even have a interview schedule. You only have the broad topic, and you have to go and take the interview, and all the questions which arise in your mind are based upon the responses of the participant. That is an unstructured interview without a field guide. And an informal interview is usually one which is conducted in participant observation, where you do not even know the topic or anything. You just observe, and in your participant observation, you are part of a group and you are observing as a part of a qualitative research. And there you think of the topics which crop up and the questions which come up, and you informally interview people who are there in the group. Are you all understanding these differences?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So when you are talking about qualitative research, usually what you look at are the semi-structured interviews. What you conduct, say, in in-depth interviews or key informant interviews, those are semi-structured interviews. And the key of these semi-structured interviews is the flexibility, which allows the conversation to flow naturally, and you ask spontaneous questions which arise based on the participant's story and responses. So the agenda is very loose as vis-a-vis if you compare to a structured interview, and you only have to ensure that your interaction is on track. So the script is not very strict. There is flexibility. You only have outlines of topics and questions, and then your conversation is adaptable to the storyline which is being built up in that particular conversation. This is how your in-depth interviews are different from the questionnaire-based interviews which are conducted in quantitative research. The key word here is the flexibility which is there in in-depth interviews. So I'm just trying to show this picture that if you want to describe something which is there on the surface of the earth, vis-a-vis you want to describe something which is there in the depth of the surface of the earth. The skills which you require would be very different, right? The training, the skills which you require would be very different. The tools which you are going to require are going to be very different. So when you plan to do qualitative research, you have to understand that you have to have those skill sets to conduct qualitative research. You need to be trained and you need to practice stuff just as you would do in quantitative research. And your quantitative research is nothing but your epidemiology and your biostatistics. That is what helps you with your. So if you're good in your epidemiology and biostatistics, then you're going to be very confident in conducting your quantitative research. So what happens in qualitative research? What are those skill sets? So can anyone tell me what are the tools you use for collecting data in qualitative research? One, of course, is the in-depth interview. What are the other options?
Focus group
Focus group
discussions.
discussion.
Yes, focus group discussion. Anything else? The third thing is observation. So there are key tools, three key tools in qualitative research. One is in-depth interview, the second is focus group discussion, and third is the observations. So when you're conducting in-depth interviews, now we saw what are interviews, right? They are conversations or two-way communications in which there is exchange of ideas and flow of information. Now we look at the first word, in depth. Now when I say in depth, there are some characteristics, when you are looking at an in-depth interview. If you want to be in a phase of conducting a successful in-depth interview, these are some points which you really need to look into. One is whether you have chosen an appropriate respondent. Not everyone who is interviewing and not every interviewee is an appropriate candidate for in-depth interview, right? So a person who has the knowledge on the topic, who has the personality of speaking up, opening up, and communicating well. So you have to be sure that your respondent is a correct candidate for in-depth interview. The second thing is to establish a good rapport. I'm going to talk more about rapport building, but the first key important point is knowing the local language. You cannot be confident of conducting an in-depth interview if you do not have the know-how of the local language. Of course, there are translators and all who can come into picture, but that will never really satisfy you as an interviewer. So getting to know the local language is the key for in-depth interviews. Then also knowing the local culture and norms is important for rapport building. Where you conduct the interview, the location, ensuring adequate privacy and confidentiality of the responses is also equally important. You cannot conduct these interviews in overcrowded places or where there are many interruptions or people can clearly hear what the respondent is saying. So this is another aspect also for building rapport. Then the duration of the interview. Your quantitative interviews can last for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. But ideally, if you go in an in-depth interview, it can go anywhere from 1 hour, 2 hour or more. And sometimes a single interview may not suffice. You may have to do follow-up interviews. So this is something you have to remember. You have to give a lot of time in in-depth interviews for a single respondent. And then, of course, a lot of practice. Now, how do you do this practice? You do it in the form of role play with your colleagues. So once you develop your field guide or your interview guide, you use that guide and then practice it with your colleagues or your teammates so that you get a good hang about the questions and are confident about asking those questions. And you are very clear about the flow or you don't miss any important questions. And also you stick to your research question and objectives. Then, of course, training. You have to undergo robust training in qualitative research to conduct such kinds of interviews. Then, of course, we are going to look at the type of questions which are asked in detail. So, the questions, what kind of questions and questioning, and along with questioning, active listening. So, this listening, these two skills are of prime importance in in depth interview. What are the questions you ask, how you ask those questions, and simultaneously, hand in hand, what about listening? So, are you successful in listening and using what you are listening to further take forward the interview? Of course, you are going to design your interview schedule, but you have to be well versed with your schedule. So that practice is going to help you getting well versed with your tool, which is your interview schedule. Then, along with the questions, there are follow-up questions probing about which we are going to see in detail. Then, when you are looking at the scenario where you are conducting interviews, you also have to see to it that you do not have any interruptions during the interviews, because interruptions are going to break the flow of your interview, and you have to have a lot of patience, because I told you these interviews are going to run for hours together. So a lot of patience. You cannot hurriedly conduct an in-depth interview. So these are some things which you need to remember. Any questions still here? If you have any questions, you can ask. Otherwise, I will move forward. I'm just having a look at who all have joined, so I know if I ask questions, I can direct it to someone. Okay. So the next section which we are looking at is this particular example. Now, this is a interview which I am trying to take of a teenage pregnancy in a tribal girl in a tertiary care hospital. It is an overcrowded hospital, and I am there right in the OPD trying to talk to her. So, what are your comments about this interview? Now, anyone in this group who does not know Marathi, you can raise your hand. So, I know that if there is anyone who does not know Marathi. So everyone knows Marathi, right? Okay, Aishwarya. Anyone else? Okay. So Aishwarya, Ajit, I'm sure Ajit is also here, and there could be a few others. So this is nothing but I'm asking questions, and the part which is in bold is the interviewer, and the part which is not in bold is the respondent. So what you can see is that I'm asking a question and the answer. So what is your comment about this transcript? Anyone?
Ma'am, answers are one word or two words only.
Yeah. Yes. So what
It
do you think could be
flows
the
in the
reasons? What could be the possible reasons? Like I'm asking her name, her age, then I'm asking her about her husband, and I'm asking a few questions.
They're very specific and very direct. They're not
Yeah,
like uh, asking her to explain anything. It's like
correct. So
one word answer.
yeah, very right. So the questions are open-ended, but they are easily answerable in one or two words. That is one point. The questions are, as Shahrukh said, very direct. Anything else you think? What other reasons could be there that I am getting such kind of responses?
ma'am might be she because of privacy she might be not be able to open up.
Yeah, so one is I already told you this is an overcrowded OPD, and I'm there talking to her. So the location is not right. There is no privacy confidentiality. Then this girl actually was not very comfortable talking in Marathi. She knew her tribal language very well. She would have been more comfortable with someone speaking her local language, right? So that is another issue. Then she is also worried about some legal issues. Probably some it could I could just ask her questions on sensitive topics. So there is some stress out there. So you can see that there is an issue with establishment of repo also, probably because of all these circumstances in which this interview is being framed, right? So remember that if you are planning to do qualitative research in any community, you should know the local language, that you should know their customs, uh, you should know what is acceptable, they are going to be comfortable with, and of course the location in which you are going to conduct the interview is also going to be important. So rapport and rapport building, this is of prime importance when you are interested in uh, conducting in-depth interviews. So what is a rapport? It is actually your ability to quickly create a positive, relaxed, and a mutually respectful environment for your interview. And how quickly you can do it, it is of prime importance because you have limited time to interact with the respondent. So that is again a skill set in which you can, have a friendly smile, a relaxed body language, a pleasant tone of your voice, humor, of course, if it is appropriate, but be humble and be patient. And the cultural and the local aspects of each community, which are different, those also need to be studied before you enter a particular community. Now, this rapport is not a one time process. Again, it is very, very dynamic. So, when you begin in the interview, might be the respondent has a lot of apprehension. They are not certain what questions you're going to ask. Then there is exploration, there is cooperation, and then they open up. But if they open up at one point, it does not mean that the rapport is established and you can relax. As you keep on taking the interview, you move ahead, you will see that there are fluctuations in the rapport, and you have to make efforts to sustain the rapport because rapport changes and fluctuates over time. So, as you are interviewing, as you are listening, you also have to be alert as to what is happening to the rapport which you have established with the respondent, because ultimately in this kind of interview you have to keep the informant talking, and if the informant is talking comfortably, it is a hint that you are in good space. Now, this is one example of a interview. So you can see that the interviewer is asking a question and is first introducing himself or herself to the respondent. And then the question is, please tell me your name. So what do you see here? Can you tell me what do you see in this transcript?
Ma'am, the respondent was more comfortable, like just the name was asked, still he has answered to the extra information into that.
Yeah, very right. So you can see
Building
that,
rapport,
yes,
like the doctor is trying to build rapport by answering more.
correct. Very much right. So what happens? See, there the question was, tell me your name. But from the response, we know that this respondent is very enthusiastic and wants to communicate his education status, right? So what the interviewer has correctly caught is, okay, he is now appreciating that he has done a PhD and has asked a question. And in this particular transcript, when I read this transcript, it was very clear that this particular piece, yeah, easily the interviewer could have just neglected, I have asked the name, that formality is over, and move on to the proper questioning. But this simple, act of appreciating the qualification, that extra qualification which is there, has built a very good rapport and has taken the interviewer to a very different level. So this interviewer is alert. He is not only catching hold of the response, but is also understanding the mental status of the respondent and is playing with that status and enhancing the rapport by correctly appreciating what needs to be appreciated with that response. So this is something which you need to learn, which comes with practice. Now, when you look at the interview technique and process, actually there are two things I told you which happen simultaneously. One is you're asking questions, and the other is active listening. So first, we are just going to look at the questions, because questioning questions is so key to in-depth interviews. So what about the questions? Now, there are three different types of questions. One is descriptive questions, structural questions, and contrast questions. Now, as the name suggests, descriptive is where you are trying to really understand their perceptions, understand a particular phenomenon, understand why they are feeling what they are feeling. Structural is trying to understand the structure of a particular phenomenon, like how do they define, classify, can they really group certain factors which are contributing to a particular phenomenon. And contrast is where you ask them to compare something so that you get more clear idea about their viewpoint, right? So I'm going to give some examples, and mostly we use these descriptive questions. So I'm going to talk first about the descriptive questions in detail. So in the descriptive questions, you are trying to understand the respondent's world, and there are four main types of descriptive questions. One is the grand tour question, another is the mini tour question, then there are example questions and experience questions. A grand tour question means you ask the respondent of a typical situation in their environment. So, a typical day in your life, or typically tell me how does your OPD function from 9 to the time it closes. So, that's a grand tour question, a typical thing described in detail, and then it's an open ended question, a free flow for the respondent. In the mini tour question, it is like the grand tour, but it's focused on a smaller area. So instead of saying on a typical day, you will ask for a particular period of time or a particular experience, or the whole, instead of saying the whole OPD, you will talk of a particular episode, right? So mini tour questions are more focused on a small area or a small time frame. Example questions are, of course, where you ask for a specific example, ask them to describe a particular example. And experience question is you ask them about anything in their experience which was very interesting, different, noteworthy, or relevant. So in descriptive questions, you can frame your questions keeping these different types in your mind. Just a few examples. So you can, in the grand tour question, you ask respondents for a verbal tour. So you say, okay, describe a typical clinic day in the ARV clinic. In the mini tour question, you are going to focus on a small aspect. So the respondent says, I didn't come to the hospital immediately after the dog bite. There was a little bit of a delay. So you say, okay, can you tell me what all happened from the time the bite occurred to the time you reached the hospital? So you are now focusing on a particular time frame. That is a mini tour. So you're putting a lot of respondent burden, and chances of recall bias might be in a grand tour. In a mini tour, it is more likely that you're going to get reliable answers. Then you have example questions. You ask specific example, like the respondent says, handling some situations in my profession is very stressful. So the question you ask is, can you give any example of such a situation? This is an example question. An experience question will be, can you tell any interesting experience during the university seminar? Now, some of the PGs from my department will remember that we had conducted a session on a qualitative research where we had focused on this topic of university seminars. For those who are not well versed, in Mumbai, we conduct university seminars in the sense that each medical college in Mumbai holds a weekly seminar on a Saturday where PG students from all other colleges in Mumbai attend the seminar, and that we call as university seminar. So you will see that throughout this presentation, I am going to refer to the university seminar, the questions which can be framed for understanding this phenomenon of university seminar, which is very unique to Mumbai city. So then what are the other types of questions we saw? I told you there are structural questions and contrast questions. So structural questions are like you are trying to ask, this is again everything I'm trying to ask regarding the university seminar. So if I'm asking them different kinds of activities that happen during the seminar, or can you classify or tell me the types of presentations? So I'm trying to see how does this respondent structure the answer, or what is the thought process when they are classifying or telling me about the different things which happen during the seminar. In the contrast questions, I'm going to ask them to contrast, to compare, right? So what do you think is the difference between the good and the poor presentation in these seminars? And then might be there are few seminars which are moderated by faculty and some by the peers. So what do you think, how are the discussions different from each other? So those are the contrast type of questions. So when you are designing your questions, you can use descriptive questions in which you can have the grand tour, mini tour, experience, example questions, or when you want something which is more focused but still open-ended, then you can think of structural questions or contrast questions, which are still giving the respondent an opportunity to think, and there is still a free flow of responses. Any questions till now?
No, ma'am.
So
Ma'am,
yes,
ma'am,
Aisha.
is mini tour and probing same, ma'am?
No, I'll tell you. I'll tell you
Okay.
as no. as we go ahead. So now this when actually we are going towards that topic only. So asking questions, now when you are asking questions, there is a main question which is a very, very broad question. But the key in in-depth interview is to dig deep. You want to dig deeper and deeper with your questions. So you do that with follow-up questions and probes. Now there is, if you read literature, there can be confusion with follow-up questions, probes, but a lot of focus is on probes. So what I will do is I just tell you, remember that you cannot be satisfied with a single broad question. You have to have something following up that question. It can be a sub question or a probe. So you are asking more questions. Now, from where do these more questions come? One is can be these questions which you are asking can be based on the response which you are getting from the participant. So you want more clarification, you want more elaboration, you want more information. So you are going to ask additional questions. So those are sub questions which will be asked. Now these questions you cannot design beforehand. So you have to be alert and listening to the answers, and these questions are to be generated from those responses, right? So you can ask for an example, an illustration, you can ask for clarification based on the responses which you have got. So you are trying to dig deeper into the answers which you have got. Another way of digging deep is you know that what is your research question, and might be some of your themes or sub themes. Might be you have predetermined determined these themes or sub themes. You already have a structural framework, and when you have asked the broad question, those points have not been covered by the respondent, right? So you are going to ask those uncovered points in your follow-up questions or sub questions, so that you not only go deep, but there is also you complete the entire horizon of the um, the research question. And the third thing is when you are interacting, you are asking questions, or you are throwing prompts, is also your job to show that you are having an interest in the responses and that you understand what the participant is telling you, and keep him talking. For that also, you may have to utter a few words, or you may ask a very simple question from that perspective. So what I'm trying to say is you call it as follow-up question, sub-question, a probe, but all these are helping you go deeper, dig deeper, and really go into the truth. Are you understanding this aspect of in-depth interview?
Yes, ma'am.
So,
Yes, sir.
yeah. So when you look at the probes, now because this is a very important aspect, because probing is something which is very crucial in depth interviews, and the word in depth really can garner, the real meaning of the word in depth can come only because of this probing. And if you're good in probing, then you can say, okay, you are good in depth interview. So you should know in and out about probes and probing. So probes help you to elicit rich and deep data, and reach that depth which you intend to go to. But the first thing for probing is to listen carefully. Now probes are of two types. One is based on the responses or during the interview, which come naturally to the interviewer. But sometimes there are pre-designed probes also. So if you look at interview schedule, sometimes you will see that pre-designed probes are also mentioned. So those are the probes which come from your pre-decided themes or sub-themes. So you can have pre-decided probes also. So you can have pre-decided follow-up questions, sub-questions, or those which crop up during the interview. Similarly, you can have pre-decided probes or those which come up during the interview. And of course, you cannot be very rigid with your probes. Probes have to be culturally appropriate. The way you react, what you talk, what you ask, the way you behave, all that will depend upon the community in which you are conducting the interview and with whom you are interacting. So these are just a few examples. Like, you have a main question, what are the effects of alcohol consumption among youths? You get some response. So the follow-up question is, you say, okay, you said this, can you explain that further, or can you give me an example of that particular thing? Then these are follow-up questions. You can have probe for specifics. That is, these probes are mentioned in the interview schedule beforehand. It means the interviewer has to probe for alcohol effects on youth behavior, on academics, on relationship with others, and economic situation. So if any of these are covered in the main interview, then these are dropped. But if these are not mentioned by the respondent, these are brought up by the interviewer in the form of a probe. So you know that everything is covered and you have gone into the depth of the topic. So there are different types of probes. So there is something known as a silent probe, means the respondent is giving you an answer. All you have to do is remain quiet without interrupting or cross questioning, and you just wait and you allow the informant to continue. Now, this gives them an opportunity to think, to stop, to think, to reflect, to work upon their answer, and to then answer conflict. It means that they are answering, they wait for some time. You also should wait and give them some time to think and to answer. But you have to use this sparingly. You cannot overuse the silent probe. You have to use this very cleverly. You should know when they are thinking and when they are likely to continue, and you should not interrupt. The other is the Uhu probe. Now, this encourages the participant to continue. This builds confidence. So, these are affirmative noises where you say, okay, aha, okay, ha. These are the kinds of words which the interviewer comes up with. At the same time, they can nod, or with their hands, they can say, okay, what you are saying is right. And they affirm with the interviewer so that they continue confidently with their answers. So just that you are understanding and you are getting and you are interested. The third kind of probe is the echo probe, where you confirm what the interviewer is saying. So you repeat the last thing that the informant said, so that the informant again knows, okay, with interest, this person is listening and is again narrating the same thing. So based on that, you can again further ask some question, like here in this particular example, it is said that you said that the child started having loose stools, became tired, and then refused to eat. So then what happened? So what was said earlier is narrated again, revised, and then you build up a question. So this builds more confidence, and the interviewee is going to take great interest and tell you things in greater detail. Then you have, if they are narrating something, giving you an answer, you can just encourage them to expand and give you more details by just saying, okay, what else? Tell me more about that particular thing. Then you can, raising topics discussed previously means that they have answered something, then there are 2 or 3 more questions, and then you remember that there was something which was answered previously. So you say, okay, some time ago you raised this particular topic, or you said something like this. So can you tell me more about it? That is again going back to some topic which was discussed earlier. And the last one, which is a bit tricky, is a baiting or a phased assertion probe. Now, this means that the interviewer actually does not know something, but puts or gives a bait to the respondent. So he says that, okay, I have heard about this, I know this, just to make the informant comfortable. So this is actually again very, very tricky. When and how to do it, you can land in trouble with this, but this is again by only those who are well versed with in-depth interviews with the community and how to handle stuff on the field, that they can use such kind of probes. But these are the different kinds of probes which are there. And this is again, I am talking about the university seminar. So one of the questions was, can you tell any interesting experience during the university seminar? So can you tell me what is the type of question which is being asked? So what we have discussed is the types of question and the probes. So what is this? What is this type of question? What are the types of question we saw till now?
Descriptive, structural, and contrast question.
Descriptive,
Yeah,
contrast.
great. So what is this question? What is the this type of this question which you are saying?
Descriptive.
Descriptive.
Why do you say so?
Because
Because
it's
we are
asking about
trying to
what you found
understand.
interesting.
Yes. So this is a descriptive. In descriptive question, which type?
Experience type.
Yes. So we are asking a particular experience, right? So this is a response we got that most of the presentation in a particular college, I felt good instead of university seminar. There was one conference on which there was a program regarding air pollution from morning to evening. I found it more interesting. So what was it about this seminar that you found interesting? What is this? What is this?
Mini tool.
Okay. Mini tour, okay. So, okay, let's accept Aishwarya. So, what I'm trying to say is there can be a question which generates from the answer, right? So, you have a question which comes from the answer. So, the respondent said about that the speaker was from a national health board, he spoke good, and his speech was good, and all the speakers' presentation were good. They didn't make us feel very bored, and they were engaging and they conveyed the concept. Now the interviewer says, So it means that, okay, I'm listening, I'm understanding, go ahead. And the interviewee again goes on narrating freely. So what happens now if you say that, can you tell any interesting experience? And the interviewer says, yes, there was a seminar on air pollution from 9 to 5. And you stop there, right? The question ends there. You are not digging deeper. Then what happens? All the rest of the stuff which has been narrated is lost. And that is what we mean by follow-up questions, probing and digging deep, right? So you have to be alert, listen to what the answer is, ask more and more questions till you are satisfied that you have got what you want. Are you getting me here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Yes, ma'am. ma'am.
Because I am listening to some of the other interviews, and what I'm seeing is that you are getting satisfied with just the first paragraph. That is not to be done. You have to ask more and more questions and go deeper. Now, this is another question. Oh, where is it? Yeah. So, this is another question. Okay, again, the same thing, university seminar asking about positive experiences. So they are saying, see, there was a seminar I attended. It was against women violence. It was a very good experience. So the interviewer could have stopped here and said, okay, this was a seminar on women violence, which this particular respondent felt was a positive experience. But no, you have to say, okay, tell me more about it. So the respondent tells you something more and says that it will help me spread knowledge. The interviewer can still ask more. How do you think this can happen? How do you plan to do this? Right? So you ask more and more questions. All of these are not predetermined, pre-designed. These are based on, you can see whatever examples I'm giving are based on the um, response which we get in the interview. Now, this is very, again, just I'm mentioning this taxonomy to harp on the fact that probing is very important. And there is a lot of theory on probing, and there is a lot of literature on probing which you can read. So, this is the DICE taxonomy. DICE is nothing but descriptive probe, ideographic memory probe, clarifying probe, and explanatory probe. So, whatever we have discussed till now, those are described here in greater detail in this article, which I'm mentioning in this particular slide with examples. So I'm not going to go into the detail. Just the take home message is that probing is important. Try and read and try and practice probing in your in-depth interviews. Are you with me till here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Now the next thing is the do's and don'ts in interviews. So if your mind is still, you are trained to design closed ended questions. If your mind is coming up with closed ended questions, you have to just rethink and rephrase your closed ended questions and make them open ended. And you have to ask in qualitative research questions like what, when, where, who, and how. And this why question is very tricky, and I'm going to talk about it in a while. So you are interested in telling using these words: describe, tell me more about something, or how. And the strength of in-depth interviews is to take up sensitive topics. So there will be sensitive questions in in-depth interviews. You should know how to ask these sensitive questions and when to ask the sensitive questions. So again, a lot of training which is required for dealing with sensitive topics. Now, as far as the don'ts are considered, one is, of course, no closed-ended questions here. Then the why questions. Why are we worried about why questions? Because when you ask someone, why did you do it? Why does this happen? Then it evokes rationality. The respondent goes on a back foot. It, creates a barrier in the conversation, and it puts a burden on the respondent because now they think that they have to answer it correctly, the why question. They cannot make a mistake here, or they cannot land in a soup by giving some kind of a reason. And there is a potential for misinterpretation. Your why question, what exactly are you asking, the reason for what? So that I'm going to tell you more about the why questions, because this is something we end up doing in interviews. And then of course there are no leading questions. I'm also going to tell you about leading questions, right? So let's first look at the why questions. Now if you look
Ma'am,
on, yes, Shahrukh.
ma'am, regarding the why questions only,
Hmm.
like, can we reframe it into like a what
That is what
question?
exactly I'm doing. Yes, I think you
Okay.
all are listening to me wide awake and you are into active listening, which is a good sign. So this is what I'm talking about, reframing and looking for better alternatives in the why questions. So if you now these are very straightforward questions, again everything pertaining to the university seminar. But say you have a question, why did you not attend the weekly seminar last week? Now, this is a very judgmental question. It can put give a lot of burden or put a person in embarrassment. So instead of that, what can you say? So you can say, could you share the factors that influenced your decision not to attend the seminar last week? The same thing, but you are asking differently. Another thing is, why are some sessions boring for you? Instead of that, you say, what are the different aspects that certain sessions are less engaging for you? Why don't students ask questions during seminars? Again, you can say, instead of why, what makes it easier or harder for students to ask questions during seminars? Why do you choose that topic? Why does the group choose a particular topic for presentation? Again, what considerations are taken into account while choosing the topic? Why do pgs feel unprepared for the seminar? What are the circumstances which contributed to the pgs feeling unprepared? So instead of making it more judgmental, evoking defensiveness, sounding evaluative, forcing any kind of justification or any blame game, you can just reframe and make the respondent comfortable. So when you ask the why questions, you are evoking rationality, seeking justification, and putting the respondent on a back foot in a defensive mode. While if you use these words, you will see why is replaced by what very cleverly. And an attempt is made to explore the context, experiences, and the processes. You will see that you will get better answers and you will continue building the rapport which you have established in the beginning. So, Shahrukh, did you get your answer here?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah. So when you are, even if you write down first, in the first go, your questions can be why. You can go back and reframe your questions, remove the why, and most probably you are going to replace it with what and some other interesting way of coming up with better alternatives. So this is something where you have to put your hard work. So this is about the why questions, which should be avoided or used very sparingly. There can be situations where there is no other option, but you have to use it sparingly. And the leading questions. What are these leading questions? You must have heard on television where people say, "Don't put the words in my mouth." Right? That is a leading question where you are pushing the respondents to answer in a specific manner based on the questions which are framed or the questions which are asked. So again, here are the questions, the leading question on the left, and how you can reframe it into an unbiased question. So the question is, most smart people in this community always use condoms, don't they? So the respondent is going to say yes only to this kind of question. But instead of that, you could reframe it in a way that I have heard some people in this community say that most smart people use a condom. Others say they don't use condoms. What do you think? So you have balanced it off and you have left it up to the respondent to go in either way. Another example is was one reason that you wanted to use the female condom to prevent sexually transmitted infections. Here again, you are giving the answer to the respondent. Instead, you would say, what were the reasons you wanted to use the female condom? And then, depending upon if they say, I wanted to protect myself, then you could say, what is it that you are trying to protect yourself from? So, do you think people in the school community don't talk about sex and condoms because so and so and so? So, again, you are giving off the answer. They will say yes, and then they'll talk about it. Instead of that, you have to really make it unbiased and open. Are you getting me here? These two things, the why, the don'ts. In the don'ts, no closed-ended questions, no leading questions, no why questions. Are you getting me here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Any questions?
Ma'am,
Yes.
like in the first question, we are giving him a scenario and asking, what do you think? So if
Hmm.
in this case, if the respondent says that I have no opinion on this, so should we just stop and go on to the
Yes.
next one, or?
Yes. You cannot force the individual to answer any question. If they say, I don't have opinion, I don't know, then you have to respect the respondent. Right, Joyce?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So again, I have given 2 or 3 references in some slides, so you can use those references and read that material. Now, when you are asking questions, of course, your questions are going to be open-ended and non-leading. But there is also something known as a funnel approach. That is, you begin in general and then you come up with more focused questions and more focused topics. The key in an in-depth interview is to get the informant on the topic and then get out of the way and see to it that they keep on talking. And when you look at the transcript, if you give me your transcript, I will tell you whether it is a successful in-depth interview or not. If the content spoken by the interviewee is far more than the interviewer, then I am satisfied that this is a good in-depth interview. Because sometimes you see that the person who is asking the question has asked long question and the respondent is answering in one word or one sentence. So that is not the way to go. Another important thing is when you want to ask questions, you cannot be just peeping into your interview schedule every now and then. You have to be comfortable and confident about your questions and your interview guide. And that is why practice is very, very important. And the last one is very important, iteration. What does this mean? That there are cycles of data collection and early analysis. You cannot just keep collecting data and keep dumping it and say you will analyze it in the end like you do in quantitative research. In qualitative research, here in in-depth interview, you complete a couple of in-depth interviews. You have to analyze and you have to see what kind of codes are being generated, what are the possible themes which are coming up, and then you have to redesign your interview schedule. So what happens? You can now come up with your sub questions and your probes. So might be in your first draft of your interview schedule, it was just 5 questions, nothing broad questions. But after a couple of interviews, you read them, you analyze them, then you can add sub questions and probes because now you want to dig deeper and you know where your track is moving. So this is a very cyclical, evolving, reflective process. Your data collection analysis, which is a key to qualitative research, they go hand in hand. Any questions here? Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So see, now it's nearly, I think it's what, 6:56. Now one option for us is to stop here, digest what we have learned till now, and come back again in the next session. What do you say? Because what have we covered till now? We have just quickly seen what is qualitative research and that it's really different from quantitative research. And then we have seen that there are 3 tools of these, one which we were focusing on is the in-depth interviews. We saw what interviews are in general, what are the different types of interviews. Then we are interested in the semi-structured interviews, which are the in-depth interviews where there is a lot of flexibility. Then we saw that in-depth interviews, what is important is the questions, the questioning, and the active listening. And we focus on the first part, that is the questions. We looked at the different types of questions. Then in the questioning, it is not just the main broad question, but the follow-up questions and the probes. And we saw in detail about the different types of probes which are there. Then we looked at the do's and the don'ts. In the don'ts, we focused on the closed-ended questions, then on the leading questions and the why questions. And then now this is the last part in which we are talking about the important aspects of asking questions, moving from general to a more focused questions, and then being comfortable with your research interview guide, and of course doing iteration by combining data collection analysis as you move ahead in your research. So Joyce, you can take a poll and you can tell me if you want me to stop here. I can stop here and we can do the remaining part in the next session, or we can continue and end the remaining part. So you can put in the chat box whatever you want. If you want to continue, stop, and Joyce will tell me what we need to do.
Ma'am, we can continue, I guess, because majority of the people are saying we can.
Yeah. So those who really need to leave can leave, because you will get access to the recording, no issues. We will continue. If you really want to leave, you can comfortably leave and then can listen to the recording. So after the questions, what we do is we are going into active listening. So in listening, it's active listening means you have to listen and think. So remember, in in-depth interviews, you are asking questions, no doubt, but you are listening, and at the same time, you are imbibing what is being told and thinking, and then framing the remaining questions and moving ahead. So in active listening, you should be aware of what the respondent is saying. What is the story which is coming up? And you have to ask yourself, okay, is it this detailed enough? Or do I need to go deeper? What are the words used? Do I understand it? Or do I need to question more on the terminologies also? Do I need to understand more? Do I need more description here? I also need to understand what is the respondent talking. Is it their inner voice or is it their outer voice? Inner voice means they're talking for themselves. Outer voice means they're talking about someone else or about a particular group they represent. So what is it that they're talking about? Am I getting both the inner and the outer voice? And then, of course, you also have to be aware of the process. That is, you are taking the interview. It is 3 hours, 4 hours. What is the duration? Are you tired? Is the respondent tired? Then, are you touching upon any sensitive topics? So, you have to be aware of all the things. So, you have to listen. At the same time, you have to also think, analyze, and take your interview forward. Then coming to your interview schedule, I told you the characteristic feature of semi-structured interviews is the flexibility. So the set of questions which are there in your interview guide, you need not follow it exactly in the same sequence. That is what is flexibility, and that is why it is semi-structured, right? So when you are developing your interview schedule, how do you develop your interview schedule? So you just have to first enlist the topics for your research questions. So brainstorming of topics and a list of those topics helps you come up with broad open-ended questions which are to be asked for those topics related to your research question. So this is what needs to be done first. and then you can narrow down. So you can have some sub questions and some probes in the beginning. As you move ahead, you can edit your interview schedule, remove some probes or questions, and add in more, which will help you to really get into the depth of the topic. You may change the wordings also if you want. And then if sometimes you need to collect some closed-ended data, for example, socio-demographic data, you must have read in articles that when quotes are written in the article, in the brackets it is mentioned whether the respondent was a male, female, their age, their occupation. So such basic information is given about the respondent. Now, if you want to collect such kind of data, don't do it at the beginning of the in-depth interview. Close the interview with such closed-ended data. So in the end, you can ask these questions. And then, of course, iteration means don't stick to the interview schedule you have as it is till the end. You can modify it depending upon the responses you get in the early phase of your research. Now, this is an example of a tool which you will use, say, again, going back to the university seminar. Now, I want to understand the perception, the feelings of the postgraduate students who are attending the university seminar. So, if I want to use a quantitative tool, I will use a Likert scale and I will have 9 or 10 questions and I will ask them to mark on this Likert scale. So, there are different sentences and this becomes a quantitative research for understanding the perceptions of PG students regarding university seminar. If I want to have an interview schedule, I will have some broad questions to understand the perceived academic value, their experiences, the perception about quality of presentation discussions, what are their experiences about logistic, the structure, frequency, if they have any suggestions, the challenges, the barriers. So some broad questions. After a couple of interviews, I may add a few probes and I may, refine this tool further. So the tool which I design for quantitative research is very different from the tool, the interview schedule which I'm going to design and then iteratively build upon for my in-depth interview. Now, when you are doing this interviews, there are these logistics, some logistics also have to be kept into mind. So you begin by greeting and then introducing yourself. You describe the project you are in and what you are trying to do in the project. And then you explain what amount of time is going to be required and what is expected of the interviewer. Take the consent if you're recording for the recording too, and tell them that there is nothing right or wrong in the answer. They can just speak as they would naturally do, and that there is going to be confidentiality for all the answers which are going to be collected. If they have any questions, you need to answer those questions. So you can have an initial icebreaker question like the example I gave earlier. So something which can quickly, I told you repo has to be built, but also very, very quickly. So you can do that by asking some general interesting questions. And then I told you the funnel approach, moving from general to focused question. Now, you also have to ensure that the respondent understands that you are genuinely interested in the responses and that you do not already know everything. Sometimes what happens, when you're taking interviews, one tends to take a stance that they already know everything, right? But you have to show appropriate cultural ignorance that we are coming from a different world. I'm trying to understand your world, and not only by what you speak, but also from your non-verbal behavior. And then when you're closing off your interviews, you have to again ensure that whether they have communicated all that they wanted to tell you, whether the respondent feels you have missed any important questions. Sometimes they could tell you, see, there are some other questions you can ask which may be important. And then, of course, sometimes you'll feel that this interview is still incomplete. I need to get back and get more information. So you need to tell them that is it possible to meet again and take a time for meeting again. And then, of course, you can also do snowballing by asking them, okay, is there anyone else who can be a good participant for this topic? And then you can thank the participant for the time which has been given for the interview. I think these are the last few slides. So actually, there was no need of a break. I'm going to finish up in I think 5 to 10 minutes. Any questions till now?
No, ma'am.
Now, remember, this is something very crucial. That is, in when you're conducting in-depth interviews, who is the expert? The interviewer is not the expert. It is the participant who is the expert, and the researcher is the student. They are trying to learn from the respondent. So this is what the direction is in the in-depth interview, and you have to accept this aspect of the interview. So you are, trying to explore their experiences, understand their perceptions and insights. So you are a learner, and the participant is the expert. He or she is the authority figure who is sharing with you or giving the information, and you have to therefore value their knowledge, their experiences. It is only then that you can get the depth of the understanding which is needed for a particular topic. So you should ask yourself when you are taking the interview, when you're preparing for the interview, whether you are in the right mindset. Because sometimes when you read the transcript or when you listen to the interview, it becomes very obvious that the interviewer is trying to gain an upper hand, and trying to ask questions with a sense that he or she knows everything and is just trying to understand or to get answers of all these different things I know. What do you think? So this is not the way to conduct an in-depth interview. So this is something which always, and therefore the word being humble, humility, patience, all these are very crucial in in-depth interview. Another thing is, because these are long drawn interviews, you can go off track in an interview, right? So if the interview is going off track, these are the topics you wanted to cover. This is your research question, but it's going off track. You should ask yourself, is it okay? Because you might get some unexpected insights, and you may be, it could be very, very important and interesting. So going off track may be beneficial sometimes, but sometimes you feel that it is really off track and you want to get it back on track. So you have to do this very, very subtly and gently, right? And uh, you have to find a point where you can say, for example, that what you're talking is really interesting, and it makes me think about some point which you feel is important for your research question, and bring back the discussion on the topic of interest. So you have to therefore be an active listener and know when the things are going off track, and then catch hold of a point so that subtly you can bring things back on track. But you can never say that, see, we are going off track, please stop this, we need to talk on this particular topic. That is not the way to take things forward. And for doing this, you should be well versed with your research topic. You should know when you are on and off track, right? So please remember this little thing which can happen. And then another point which can happen in in-depth interviews are the interruptions. So the respondent gets a phone, the interviewer gets a phone, somebody visits, there are breaks. So you first of all need to ensure that you prevent interruptions. So your location should be such that interruptions will not happen. You are going to put your mobile phones on airplane mode, or you're going to be sure you and the respondent both are not able to access any phone calls. And if at all there are interruptions, you have to show professionalism. You have to be still neutral. You cannot be agitated and angry if there are interruptions, right? So if somebody is entering the room, you cannot still continue with the question and ask them to keep answering, because might be confidentialities of prime importance there. So the break is there, except if there has been a break. And then think of a bridging prompt, like a memory bridging phrase, that before this interruption or pause, you were saying this, can you continue? Or you were exploring, or you were describing something. So can we go back to that point and continue from there? So you have to very intelligently, subtly see to it that without any embarrassment, and the flow is still maintained. And whenever such kinds of interruptions happen or things go off track, you have to record everything in the field notes. So apart from your interview transcript, another important document which is important in qualitative research are the field notes. Now, what are the field notes? They are the document station of events, conversations, behaviors which you observe in the field. Now you are taking, say, a interview in a small hut in a tribal village. You are taking the same interview in a kacha household in a urban overcrowded slum, or you are taking the interview in a chawl in Mumbai. Now all these contextually they are very different from each other. Merely your transcript is not going to capture these different contexts, right? So where did you take the interview? How was the context in which the interview was conducted? What was the location, right? How was it very noisy? Was there ample amount of space? Was there privacy? So all these things have to be mentioned in the field notes. Then what do you feel about the respondent? Were they comfortable, agitated? Were there any times where they just lost control of their emotions? So all those things have to be jotted down in your field notes. It is not just that, but also critical reflections. What did you feel? What do you feel about all these things that you saw? That is also, so doing all this, requires a lot of patience. So whether it's quantitative research or qualitative research, if you truly want to do that kind of research, you have to give sufficient time, reflect, and not only focus on your transcripts and your interviews, but have time to reflect and write field notes, which is very important. So here you can see on this slide, it is mentioned that it's sights, smells, sounds, everything in the physical environment which you document along with the impressions you had about what you saw there, what you heard, what you smelled, everything along with the reflection should be a part of the analysis, the data which you analyze. And then we are going to sometime in future talk about rigor and trustworthiness and what these are and how all of these other things apart from your transcript contribute to rigor and trustworthiness in qualitative research is something which you need to understand. I think, yeah. So these are the key skills that we have built. We have already talked about building rapport, but emphasizing the participant's perspective. This is again the same important point that the participant is the expert. You are the learner. You have to imbibe everything with a neutral attitude. And the last thing is that the skill which you should have. One is rapport building. The second is, this is again a skill, remember that you are a learner and the participant is the expert, which is really a role reversal of what you usually think. And the last is you are going to meet, because in a project you never meet similar kind of people, nor even if you are doing it, say, in for a particular agency, uh, people in the same hierarchy or same profession. So they are going to be different personalities and in different emotional states also. So are you, do you have it in your stride to interview people with different personalities, unique characters? So there can be someone who is very, very dominant and you are interviewing that person now. And in the second half of the day, you are interviewing someone who is very, very shy. So your interview style needs to be different, right? And you have to then adapt to the personality and build up that kind or use that kind of an interview style which is appropriate for that kind of personality. So again, training, practice is what helps you develop these key skills. I think yes. So with this, I'm going to stop, and what I'm going to do, I'll just stop the recording first, and then we will discuss your